Have you ever wondered when money actually starts working harder than you do? When it stops being this slow, painful process of saving and suddenly becomes something that seems to move on its own, multiplying quietly in the background while you sleep, eat, or even forget about it for a while? Most people spend years trying to figure out that moment, chasing every side hustle, every new app, every magical investment idea that promises to change everything, when in reality, the moment everything changes has nothing to do with luck and everything to do with math. And later we will see why, so leave a like and let's start. You see, there's a point in your financial journey when compounding stops being something you read about and starts being something you feel. It's when the growth of your money begins to surprise you. When you realize it's not just your effort anymore, it's momentum. And that moment happens exactly at your first major net worth milestone, $100,000. Now, before you roll your eyes and think, that's so far away, stay with me, because this is not about dreaming of being rich. It's about understanding how the math of wealth really works. Everyone thinks building wealth is linear. You save, you invest, and your balance slowly creeps up in a straight line. But that's not how the universe of money behaves. It grows like a snowball rolling down a hill. At first, it's small and frustrating. It doesn't seem to move. But as it gathers more snow, it grows exponentially, faster and faster, until it becomes unstoppable. And $100,000 is where that snowball finally picks up real speed. It's the threshold that separates people who struggle from those who suddenly start to see the results of years of discipline and patience. It's the point where your net worth becomes self-aware, where it stops depending only on your paycheck and begins to generate results on its own. And the crazy part, most people never get here. Not because they can't, but because they quit right before it happens. Let me explain what I mean. Imagine you start investing just $500 per month. That's about $125 a week. Maybe what you'd spend eating out twice or buying a few impulse things you'll forget about in a month. You take that amount, put it into a simple, diversified portfolio, and you let it compound at an average return of 7% a year. Nothing crazy, nothing risky, just steady growth. Now, if you do that consistently, it will take you almost 8 years, precisely 7 years and 9 months, to reach your first $100,000. And right here, most people lose patience. 8 years feels like an eternity when you're living in a world where everything happens instantly, where you can order food, watch any movie, or get something delivered to your door in minutes. Waiting 8 years for something feels almost prehistoric. But that's the irony. Because the people who wait, the ones who push through this first slow phase, they're the ones who see the transformation most people never experience. In those first 8 years, the majority of your $100,000 comes from your own sweat. You've probably contributed around $46,000 from your monthly deposits, while the remaining $54,000 came from your investment growth. So, in the beginning, yes, you are doing the heavy lifting. The compounding engine is still warming up. But once you reach that first $100,000, something subtle but massive happens. The math starts working in your favour instead of against you. Here's where the psychology flips. Up until that point, every dollar you save feels slow. It feels small, like it barely matters. But once you cross that $100,000 mark, you start to realise the system is shifting. The snowball's now rolling down the hill instead of up. Because now, your money is producing returns that actually feel real. Let's break it down. At 7% annual growth, your $100,000 earns $7,000 a year without you doing a thing. That's almost $600 every month. For doing nothing. That's your money paying you, like when you open your YouTube channel, since YouTube is literally on easy mode now, and it's blowing up every small channel that does things right, as I teach you in my free Telegram community with the link below. Now, think about what happens next. You keep investing the same $500 a month, just like before. But this time something strange happens. You double your net worth much faster. It took nearly 8 years to reach $100,000, but it only takes 5 more years to reach $200,000. And that's the moment when people realize compounding doesn't move in straight lines. It accelerates like gravity. You went from 0 to 100,000 in almost 8 years. Then, without any increase in effort, you went from 100,000 to 200,000 in just 5 years. That's when your perspective changes completely, because now your money is doing the heavy lifting. You've contributed around $78,000 total at this point, yet your account is worth $200,000. In other words, 60% of your wealth came from growth, not from you. You've officially passed the halfway point of effort, the moment when money works harder than you do. And that's the hidden magic of this first milestone. It's not just about the number, it's about what it represents. It represents control. It represents proof that your system works. It represents momentum that cannot be stopped unless you decide to stop it yourself. But here's the trap. This is also the moment where most people stop investing seriously. They see that 6 figures in their account and think, I've made it. They loosen up. They spend more, they stop contributing, and in doing so they kill the compounding effect right before it begins to explode. That's like pushing a snowball to the top of the mountain for 8 years, and then walking away just as it's about to roll down. To truly understand why this first milestone is so powerful, you have to look at the numbers from a distance. The first $100,000 is slow. The second $100,000 comes faster. But then something exponential happens. Once you reach around $400,000, which happens roughly 18 years into this same investment plan, your yearly growth alone adds almost $28,000 to your balance. That's passive. You're making nearly a third of what most people make from a full-time job without moving a muscle. Now you understand why seasoned investors say, the first 100,000 is the hardest. Because it's true. The math doesn't lie. It's the phase where compounding feels invisible, where the rewards seem too small to be worth the effort. But once you cross that invisible line, everything speeds up. The second 100,000 comes in half the time. The third comes even faster. It's like gravity taking over. You can't stop it even if you tried. Think about this, right? At the very beginning, almost every cent of your growth came from your own savings. By the time you've reached $400,000, 75% of your wealth comes from your investments themselves. That's not motivation anymore. That's evidence. Evidence that money grows faster than time when you let it. Now, some people might say, but isn't $100,000 just a small amount in today's world? Sure, it might not make you rich. You're not buying yachts or private islands. But this milestone isn't about luxury. It's about transformation. It's about hitting the point where wealth becomes self-propelling. Once you reach 6 figures, you've done the hardest thing. You've built the habit, the patience, and the foundation for something that cannot be stopped. If you quit before this, you'll spend your life restarting, always feeling like you're getting nowhere. But if you hold the line until you hit that number, the future versions of you will never struggle with money the same way again. Because now every dollar you have is like a worker that never sleeps, never eats, and never calls in sick. Each one is out there multiplying itself, tirelessly, endlessly. And that is the first of the 3 net worth milestones that change everything. Not because of the money itself, but because it changes you. It changes the way you think about time, patience, and effort. It teaches you that wealth isn't about doing more. It's about staying consistent long enough to let the math reveal its magic. When you reach $100,000, you're no longer just a saver. You're an investor. You're someone who understands that the power of compounding doesn't start when you make your first dollar. It starts when your dollars begin making dollars of their own. And from this point on, the game changes completely. Because if the first milestone teaches you discipline, the next one, the second, teaches you freedom. And that's where we go next. Once you've crossed that first mountain and built the foundation of $100,000, you've done something that only a small percentage of people ever do. You've pushed through the part that feels endless, the part where you're fighting gravity and doubt at the same time. You've learned patience, you've built momentum, and your money has started to breathe. But something far greater happens when you keep going. Because somewhere between that $400,000 mark and $650,000, your relationship with money stops being emotional and starts being mathematical. This is where compounding transforms from theory into a living, breathing machine that operates almost independently of you. The second net worth milestone, $650,000, is the point where everything changes, not just in your bank account, but in your mind. It's the first time your wealth begins to feel powerful, the first time you realize that your money doesn't just grow. It produces income, it creates options, it buys you time, and it gives you the most underrated form of wealth there is, calm. Because at $650,000, something subtle but life-altering begins to happen. Before I continue, I remind you that if you want to build a YouTube channel, like this one, to earn money and to reach this milestone faster, there is the link below. For the first time in your life, you could stop working and your money wouldn't stop moving. At a reasonable annual return of 8%, which is entirely realistic for a diversified long-term portfolio, that $650,000 quietly produces around $52,000 a year. That's over $4,000 a month in passive income. $4,000 that show up whether you are at work, asleep, traveling, or doing absolutely nothing. And when you start to feel that flow, when you see your money producing income that rivals what many people earn from full-time jobs, you understand why this milestone changes everything. Because now, your investments are generating the equivalent of a middle-class salary on their own. You're not working for your money anymore. Your money is officially working for you. Let's put this into perspective. The median household income in the United States is around $78,000 per year. That number represents a lifetime of trading hours for dollars. Waking up to an alarm clock, commuting, dealing with bosses, deadlines and bills. But with $650,000 invested and growing at 8%, you're earning 2/3 of that without showing up anywhere, without clocking in, without sacrificing time with your family, without missing your kids' games or your own peace of mind. And that realization right there changes how you see everything. Because you begin to understand that wealth is not about the size of your house or the car in your driveway. It's about time. It's about control. It's about being able to wake up one morning and say, I don't have to do this anymore if I don't want to. At this level, your fear of losing your job begins to disappear. The anxiety that once followed you into every meeting or paycheck cycle starts to fade. You're not fully free yet, but you can breathe. And that breath tastes different when you know you have assets quietly generating money while you're doing nothing. But there's another layer to this milestone that most people miss entirely. It's not just about the income. It's about psychological freedom. The day you hit $650,000 in productive assets, something clicks inside you. You start making decisions differently. You stop chasing quick wins. You stop saying yes to things that drain you because you're no longer making decisions out of desperation. You're making them out of choice. You might still keep your job, not because you need it, but because you want to accelerate your path even further. You might start using your paycheck not for survival, but for leverage, to build, to invest, to expand. This is where money stops being your master and starts becoming your partner. Now let's get practical again, because this isn't fantasy. It's math. Let's go back to our same example. $500 invested every month, earning 7% per year. When you reach the 22nd year of that same consistent plan, your balance sits right around $600,000. You've contributed roughly $130,000 of your own money over more than 2 decades, but compounding has done the rest. You now have an additional $500,000 created purely from growth. That's $500,000 your money made for you. And here's where people start to truly see the scale of what compounding means. Because at this point, you're earning roughly $48,000 per year just from investment returns. That's the same as adding a full-time job to your life, except it requires 0 effort, 0 time, and 0 stress. When people reach this point, they start to notice how differently they think about spending. You no longer think in prices, you think in opportunity cost. That fancy car, that's not a $60,000 car, it's a future where you lose the compounding of $60,000. That weekend trip you can't afford? You realise that investing that money instead could be the difference between hitting 7 figures a few years earlier or not at all. You start viewing every financial decision not as a loss of comfort, but as a trade between now and later. And later is winning more and more every day. At $650,000, your wealth becomes self-sustaining. Even modest returns create tangible results that affect your everyday life. A bad market year doesn't destroy you. A good year accelerates you dramatically. You're no longer fragile, you're anti-fragile. Now think about what that means emotionally. You're no longer afraid of missing one paycheck. You're no longer terrified of a sudden emergency. You're no longer checking your bank balance with anxiety. Because now you know you have something behind you, a force that never sleeps, never complains, and never stops working. And this realization creates something most people never experience in their lives: peace. You're not fully retired, but you're free in a way that very few people around you are. You can take a week off without guilt. You can handle a sudden layoff without panic. You can take care of family emergencies without falling into debt. At $650,000, you've achieved what most people would describe as partial financial freedom, but what I like to call functional independence. You still work because you want to, not because you have to, and that's a very different life. But let's go even deeper into what makes this milestone so powerful: the psychology of security. When you reach this level of wealth, you start noticing how your thoughts change. You no longer think in terms of survival, you think in terms of optimization. You start asking questions like, how can I make my money work even harder? What opportunities can I take that I couldn't before? What if I use this safety net to take a risk that changes my life completely? That's the quiet confidence that wealth gives you. Not arrogance, not flashiness, just peace. Because you know you've built something that can't be taken away overnight. At this level, you could go a full year without earning a dollar, and you'd still be fine. You could leave a job that makes you miserable and not skip a beat. You could take a year off to learn, to travel, to build a business, or simply to rest. And your money would continue growing while you do. That's the moment you realize this is what real wealth looks like. It's not about being rich, it's about being unshakable. You also start noticing something else. People around you begin to treat you differently. You're calmer, you're more measured, you make better decisions, and it shows. You're not chasing, you're choosing. That's power. And the truth is, most people will never feel this. Not because they don't have the ability, but because they never get past the slow part of compounding. They never make it to the point where the numbers start to grow faster than their effort. They give up too early, right before the momentum hits. If you stick it out, this is the reward. And yet, even though $650,000 represents an extraordinary level of security, it's still not the peak. It's the final stage before the summit. The point where your wealth is ready to multiply into something life-changing. Because while $650,000 might give you peace, $1 million gives you permanence. But before we move toward that final milestone, I want you to understand why this middle stage, this $650,000 zone, is the most dangerous one psychologically. When you reach this level, comfort begins to creep in. You start to feel safe, you start to relax. And that comfort, that quiet sense of I'm good, can kill your momentum if you let it. Because you start thinking you've arrived, when in reality, you've only just unlocked the potential for exponential growth. This is the stage where your financial future can either plateau or explode. It depends entirely on what you do next. If you keep contributing, if you stay disciplined, if you reinvest your returns instead of cashing them out for short-term gratification, the next few years will transform everything about your financial life. Because now, every year, your returns alone could equal a year of savings. You could earn $50,000 in growth, then another 50, then 60, then 80, without ever changing your contributions. Your snowball's massive now. It's thundering down the mountain, gaining weight, speed, and power. You can't stop it, and you wouldn't want to. This is the exact moment when the math becomes truly unbelievable, because every year, your wealth increases faster than your ability to save. You've crossed the invisible line between effort and momentum, and that's the beauty of this milestone. It shows you that freedom is not just possible, it's mathematical. Every person who ever reached financial independence crossed this same invisible threshold. They all went through the same slow years, the same doubts, the same tiny steps, until suddenly one day, their money began to sprint. At $650,000, you've achieved escape velocity. You've left behind the gravity of financial dependence. And once you pass this, the rest of the journey to seven figures doesn't feel impossible anymore. It feels inevitable. Because now, you've seen how the numbers grow, you've felt the momentum, and you know the power of staying consistent. You don't have to imagine what compound growth feels like. You're living it. And soon the final milestone will take everything you've learned, everything you've built, and turn it into something that truly changes your life forever. There's a moment in every investor's journey when numbers stop feeling like numbers and start feeling like power. Not the kind of power that comes from greed or ego, but the quiet, humbling kind that comes from realizing that time and discipline can beat luck every single time. It's the moment when you look at your account, you see 7 digits staring back at you, and you realize you've done it. You've built $1 million. And the crazy part is, By the time you get there, you'll notice something strange. It doesn't even feel impossible anymore. It feels inevitable, because every decision, every small contribution, every boring, consistent choice has built the foundation that carried you here. $1 million isn't just a number, it's a transformation. It's the psychological and emotional moment when you finally understand that money isn't something you chase anymore. It's something that moves with you, that grows while you live, that multiplies quietly without your supervision. And once you cross this line, you don't just change your lifestyle, you change the way you think forever. And remember that with YouTube, you can arrive here much faster. When you reach $1 million, compounding stops being a concept you try to understand and becomes something that happens faster than you can even track. The same $500 a month that once felt like drops in an ocean now feel like fuel being thrown into a roaring fire. At this point, you've been investing for nearly 3 decades, 29 years of discipline, patience, and consistency. You've invested roughly $174,000 of your own money, but your account shows $1 million. That means over $800,000 of that total wasn't earned through your work, but through the quiet, unstoppable power of compound interest. Think about that. $800,000 created by time itself. When you see that, you begin to understand why wealthy people never rush. They don't look for shortcuts because they know that compounding is the greatest force in finance. And that once you reach this level, it's almost impossible to stop growing unless you deliberately sabotage yourself. Now let's put that $1 million into perspective. A 7% annual return on $1 million generates $70,000 per year. That's almost $6,000 a month in passive income. At 8%, that's $80,000 per year. Nearly the median household income in the United States, generated entirely from your investments. You could, in theory, stop working entirely, withdraw 4 to 5% of your portfolio each year, and still have your net worth grow faster than inflation. That's not fantasy, that's math. And that's when you realize what this milestone truly represents. It's not the cars or the vacations or the new house. It's the ability to live on your terms, not anyone else's. It's the ability to say no to a boss, to stress, to anything that doesn't align with your values. It's the ability to design your life, not just survive it. At $1 million, your life becomes flexible. You're not rich in the private jet sense. You're rich in the sense that you have time, you have choice, you have security. You've escaped the cycle that keeps most people running endlessly toward the next paycheck. And here's what's fascinating about it. By the time you reach $1 million, you'll realize something that shocks most people when they finally get here. It's not about the money at all, it's about the mindset. It's about the person you had to become to reach this point. Disciplined, patient, focused, and calm under pressure. Because that person, the one who stayed consistent through recessions, bear markets, and moments of doubt, will never be poor again, no matter what happens. Let's be honest, $1 million today doesn't buy what it used to. Inflation has eaten away at its purchasing power over time. But that's not the point. The point is that $1 million invested intelligently is enough to sustain a lifestyle most people only dream about. It's enough to ensure safety, flexibility, and options. And most importantly, it's the proof that you never have to rely on anyone else. Again, you see, the first milestone, 100,000, taught you discipline. The second, 650,000, gave you freedom. But the third, 1 million, gives you peace. Because peace is not about luxury, it's about security. It's about knowing you're safe no matter what. When you reach this level, your entire psychology around money changes. You stop worrying about small fluctuations in the market. A $10,000 swing doesn't even make you blink anymore, because you understand that volatility is temporary, but compounding is permanent. You stop chasing the next big stock or crypto trend because you finally understand that the real wealth was never in picking the right investment. It was in staying invested long enough to let time do the heavy lifting. And once you see how fast your money grows at this level, you'll realize something that almost feels unfair. Every new million comes faster than the last. To go from 0 to 100,000 might have taken you 8 years. To go from 100,000 to 650,000, another 14. But to go from 1 million to 2 million might take less than a decade, sometimes just 5 or 6 years, without you doing anything differently. That's the magic of exponential growth. The more you have, the faster it grows. the bigger it gets, the easier it becomes. That's why wealthy people don't think in terms of earning. They think in terms of compounding. They understand that every dollar they spend today is a seed that could have multiplied tomorrow. They see time as their greatest asset, not money. At this point, your money no longer feels like a tool. It feels like an organism that grows, evolves, and works in harmony with your decisions. You can diversify more, invest more safely, and even take calculated risks because your foundation is solid. You can invest in real estate, fund startups, or explore opportunities that would have once felt impossible. You can design your life based on curiosity and meaning, not fear and necessity. But here's something even more interesting. Once you reach $1 million, you begin to care less about making more money and more about protecting what you've built, nurturing it, and using it meaningfully. Because the moment you no longer have to fight for survival, you start asking deeper questions. What do I actually want to do with my time? Who do I want to become? What impact do I want to leave behind? You realize that money, at its highest form, is not about consumption. It's about creation. It gives you the space to think, to build, to experiment, to give back, to make choices that are aligned with your purpose rather than your paycheck. At $1 million, you've not just built wealth, you've built stability across generations. You've created something that, if managed properly, can sustain your family long after you're gone. That's what true financial independence looks like. And it's the exact financial independence that YouTube could give you, since it's on easy mode now, and it could literally change your life forever in a month. And yet, as powerful as this milestone is, it's also humbling, because when you finally see how time and patience did most of the work, you realize that wealth was never about intelligence or luck. It was about behavior. The behavior to stay the course when others panicked. The discipline to keep saving when it felt useless. The patience to let the boring years pass quietly until compounding finally began to roar. If you've made it here, you've already won the game that most people don't even know they're playing. Because here's the truth. Most people never experience what it's like to have their money work harder than they ever could. They live their whole lives believing wealth is reserved for a chosen few. But it's not. It's for anyone willing to do something simple for a long time. Invest, stay patient, and let compounding do what it's done for centuries. When you hit 1 million, you'll look back and realize that the real reward wasn't the money. It was the time you gained, the peace you earned, and the version of yourself you became along the way. You'll realize that wealth wasn't built in sudden leaps. It was built quietly, in the background, in moments of consistency that seemed small at the time, but were monumental in the long run. And once you understand that, you'll never look at money the same way again. Now, some people stop here. They reach their million, they exhale, and they coast. They think they've reached the finish line. But those who truly understand compounding know that this is just the beginning. Because now the game changes again. Now your returns alone could fund another million in less than a decade. Now you can grow wealth not just for yourself, but for generations. From this point on, you don't have to worry about getting rich. You have to worry about staying wise. Because wealth without wisdom fades. But wealth with purpose, discipline, and patience, that lasts forever. And that's what this final milestone represents. Permanence. The permanence of knowing you'll never go back to where you started. The permanence of knowing that even if you lost it all, you now have the knowledge, the patience, and the mindset to rebuild it again. You are no longer someone chasing financial security. You are financial security. You've become the very system you once dreamed of building. And as you stand here looking back at the mountain you've climbed, from that first 100,000 that took almost a decade to the 650,000 that made you feel free, to the million that made you unshakable, you realize that the entire journey was never about wealth at all. It was about evolution, about becoming someone who sees time differently, who understands that money is not the goal, but the tool that buys the one thing that truly matters: freedom. So if you're still at the beginning, if you're still climbing, remember this. Every small deposit, every month of consistency, every boring step you take when it feels like nothing is happening is part of this exact path. You might not see it now, but one day you'll wake up and realize that everything has changed. Because compounding doesn't ask you for brilliance, it only asks you for time. And if you give it enough time, it will reward you in ways you can't even imagine. The first milestone gives you belief. The second gives you freedom. The third gives you peace. And when you finally reach that last one, you'll understand what everyone who's ever built real wealth eventually learns. That time, patience, and consistency were never just financial principles. They were life principles. Because in the end, money doesn't change who you are. It reveals who you've become. And you can find it much faster if you open your YouTube channel. Now, think about it. If you've made it this far in the video, it means what I'm explaining to you in my free Telegram community works, right? So join with the link below and let me know if you expected this in the comments, subscribe to this channel, and see you soon. Just a reminder, I'm not a financial advisor. This video is for educational purposes only, and any results depend on your own decisions and actions.